Welcome to episode 245 of the Book Cougars, two middle-aged women on the hunt for a good read. I'm Emily.
And I'm Chris. And we have thank yous today that we're going to start with. Big thanks to our newest patrons, Julie and Liz. Thank you both so much for joining our Patreon community and helping to support the podcast.
We really appreciate you. We're just fresh off a Biblio adventure together. We've spent the afternoon together and we're doing a recording in the evening, which is not like us.
It's not at all. I mean, it's going to be Emily's bedtime soon, so we'll try to make this fast.
I was going to do it in my jammies, but didn't feel like it was appropriate to go to the Biblio adventure that way. So we're entering those days where it gets darker sooner. So I'm going to have plenty of jammy time.
Mm-hmm. So Emily, what are you currently reading?
I am still reading Witches of Dubious Origin by Jen McKinley. This book pubs on October 28th, and it's my kind of nighttime reading on my Kindle. You got me in the habit of that, Chris. I have a Kindle question for you, or I should just say e-reader question for you. Mm-hmm. When you're reading, do you track the progress in the book?
Yes. I have it set up to show me how many pages are left in the chapter and then the book.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
and different publishers, I think, have different options sometimes. Because I like to know that, and it's nice to know, especially as we've been reading, like the Penguin Book of Ghost Stories, how much is left in the overall book is on the bottom. And then on the top, it shows me how many pages are left in that story, or that section of the story, as I learned painfully reading Henry James.
A little foreshadowing for the episode. This is going to be heavy on the Henry James.
So why do you ask?
I was just wondering as I was reading, because this book is very long. And so when you're doing it via e-reader, you really see like, oh, my percentage read in the book is not changing. And I keep reading. So I've been having that experience. So finally I looked online, like, how many pages is this? And it's almost 400 pages, which is why I'm still reading it. So I talked about this already, so I won't go into depth, but there was one thing I read that was really funny, so I wanted to share it because I know we have a lot of librarian types and English teachers or people with English majors maybe in their past that listen. So just a reminder, this is about Zoe, who is working as a librarian in Connecticut. Her coworker comes up to her one day and drops this big, heavy package wrapped in brown paper on her desk, and she can tell by the writing that it's addressed to her in her mother's handwriting, who she hasn't had contact with since she was 14 and who has passed away. So already it's mysterious. She unwraps it. It turns out that this thing is a grimoire. I hope I said that right, which is like a book of magic spells and things like that. She takes it to Books of Dubious Origin in New York City, which we've all visited, right? Which is like a museum/library, meets up with this cast of characters. And her mother didn't want her to get involved with witchcraft, which is why I think she separated herself. But now she's on a quest to unlock her power, even if she doesn't want to, really.
Nice. Did you say what the book is?
The book that I'm reading?
Yeah.
Yes, Witches of Dubious Order.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Witches of Dubious Origin. I keep saying order because I want it to be like a coven.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just got hooked on thinking about that book again.
Yes, the grimoire. And I don't want to spoil it because what I am about to read does take place later in the book. But I just thought it was so funny because she's finally trying to cast one of her first spells. And she casts the spell and she says, fine, clears her throat and says, regressus ad mortem corpus. It didn't feel right, so she tried saying it backwards. Corpus ad mortem regressus. Nothing happened. And so finally she says, wait, following the rules of modern grammar, shouldn't a declarative sentence be subject, verb, then object? That just made me laugh. So she turns it around and it works.
Nice.
So for you English majors or librarians or whatever, yes, the rules of modern grammar are a declarative sentence should be subject, verb, then object. And I love this character, Zoe, because she kind of knows a lot about everything, which makes her a fun female lead. So again, it's called Witches of Dubious Origin. It's out on October 28th, just in time for spooky witchy season.
Perfect.
I'm enjoying it.
Nice. Well, I'm reading a wonderful biography by Sarah Catterall, and it is Amelia Bloomer, journalist, suffragist, anti-fashion icon. I am enjoying it so much. So Amelia Bloomer, she did not create the bloomers, the pants that women wore that went down to the ankle and were sometimes, with not elastic, but tied at the ankle. But she was the one via her newspaper called The Lily who really helped promote them, the style. And a lot of the origin of this type of dress came from the East. And she made her own patterns, like she took a dress and altered the dress and would kind of have her own pattern of clothing and experimented with obviously different lengths and all that. But, when you think about it, like women wore long dresses back then and they're silk dresses or whatever material. And just think about walking around outside, how dirty they got. And, in some cases, like, 4 to 6 inches of mud at the bottom of your dress or slush from the snow, right? Not very good. Not very healthy either. When you learn that women's undergarments were crotchless.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So a lot of interesting fashion dress history in this book. But that's not all that it's about. It is about her being a journalist, starting this newspaper. She was really involved in the temperance movement initially, which was a natural lead into women's rights and also abolition. So the style of dress was initially called, bloomers, the bloomer costume type thing. But Amelia, she was from Western New York and was unfortunately ill with malaria as a young woman. And the treatments back then were horrific and caused lifelong damage, kind of similar to like Louisa May Alcott. In her treatments, they use mercury and things like that we know are potentially fatal or just really take a toll on the body with, extreme headaches and your teeth loosening, liver damage and things like that. So she dealt with that her entire adult life, but still worked so hard on this newspaper. And what's interesting, there's so many things interesting about her life, and I'm just about halfway through at this point, but her husband was involved with a newspaper and part of the Whig Party. And when they won power, he was put in as postmaster in Seneca Falls, where they lived, along with her. They were both sworn in together to be postmasters of the post office. So she had her own office, he had his, and in her office, she made it kind of cozy. She brought books and journals from home so women could stop in and talk and read. She put curtains up. They had a door that they can close. The point being that this is one of the few places, perhaps initially the only public place in town where women could go to talk to each other than their own homes. So it became a real center for women to hang out and exchange ideas, talk about the news and all that kind of thing. So I will talk about this book next episode after I'm finished with it. Another cool thing is Amelia Bloomer is the woman who introduced Elizabeth Cady Stanton to Susan B. Anthony, which is pretty cool.
So she was a networker.
Yeah, totally. So again, this is Amelia Bloomer by Sarah Catterall. And, it's a pretty short biography with the notes and index and everything. It comes in at 290 pages. So highly recommend it.
I'm reading Eat and Flourish, How Food Supports Emotional Well-Being by Mary Beth Albright. This is the beautiful book that I picked up when we were at Kindred Thoughts bookstore in Bridgeport recently. The cover caught my eye. It was kind of in the self-help / cookbook area of the bookstore. And I think I misspoke and said that Mary Beth Albright is a scientist. She is not. I'm going to quickly read you her bio. She's a writer, editor, and executive producer at the Washington Post, and she was a project director and subject matter expert for the U.S. Surgeon General, appeared on Food Network, and earned degrees from Johns Hopkins and Georgetown. So she's done a lot of different things, which she talks about here, including competing on some Food Network show, which I haven't looked up. I'm enjoying it very much. It's filled with a lot of information. I recently got the audiobook just because I had a long drive and wanted to listen. I didn't want to stop reading. Unfortunately, the narrator, Carolyn Schaefer, sounds a little bit like AI. Does that make any sense when
It
I
does,
say that?
yes.
Okay.
Yes. A little bit robotic, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is like a factual book, but I just feel like, it's a little bit hard to listen to. So even when I got home, I kind of turned back to those pages and started reading again. One of the things that really interested me was the concept of hanger, which I am sometimes accused of suffering from.
Sidebar. When we're on Biblio adventures together, like day-long Biblio adventures, we try to monitor ourselves or check in so that doesn't happen.
Yes. And I always have snacks in my purse. And as I've gotten older, I've learned that certain snacks don't work for me, like sugar, like having a cookie to boost my blood sugar does not work for me, nuts and things like that too. But I was interested in the fact that she had a chapter, or a section, I should say, under emotional eating called hanger. And I remember when hanger was put into the Oxford Dictionary in 2018. And for those who don't know, hanger is a combination of the word hungry and angry. And I thought I would just read this short paragraph because I kind of gasped when I read it because I thought about how much it has to do with your heritage as well.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a theory about why the body evolved so that hunger is associated with anger. It goes like this. During evolution, when food was scarce, it was critically important to have the extra motivation of anger, in addition to hunger, go seek food. Feelings of hunger might not have been enough to alert us to the urgency of eating to our evolution. Today, we think of the bad feelings that come with hunger as just part of hunger. But AGRP researchers, those are people who research particular things, believe that we just perceive them as the same because they happen together. Scientists believe that getting food was so important that the body developed anger and hunger as double motivation to eat. And this may be how these hangry neurons may have evolved. So then the thing is now, what she talks about is in our modern world, there's so much food available to us and so much of it is sugary, and that's not the best option to take as you are trying to decrease your hangry feelings. So she gets into things like that. She also talks about a study that was done that has proven that what we eat affects our mental health, which is a lot of what this book is about, which was the first randomized controlled study to ask if we change the diet of people with clinical depression, does it impact their mental health? The answer was yes. So she talks a lot about that as well. There's a lot of information in here, and there are some recipes at the end of the chapters that I have some issues with them, but I'm not going to talk about that, I don't think, today. I will talk about that once I've finished, because I'd like to test some of the recipes before I talk about my potential issues with them. Okay. Seems fair,
All right? Yeah, totally, it does. Yeah.
So what she goes on to talk about with the hangry idea is that also, depending on how our ancestors evolved, they may have had different consequences once they were hangry. Like, imagine being of Irish descent and your family survived the potato famine. You know, your genetics, which I'm so interested in that anyway, that build upon them, you know, our genetics build upon our ancestors. Imagine then how some of your hangry emotions might be impacted by that. It's deep.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Talks about comfort food, all sorts of things. So again, it's called Eat and Flourish, How Food Supports Emotional Well-Being by Mary Beth Albright. Writer, journalist, not a doctor. I'm sorry. I think I said that last time.
It's so important to know that for the longest time, studies regarding food and stuff were done with babies and children. And it's so important for adults, for us to understand ourselves in that way. Because I remember hearing the word hangry for the first time. I was like, oh my God, that is so perfect, because I have experienced that. And you just kind of brush it off, or at least I used to, as not really putting the things together. It was just kind of like, oh, I was really kind of not having a good day, and then I had a good lunch and now I feel better. But not really putting all the parts together. Right. That makes sense.
That it's obvious that what we eat. I mean, that's what I keep thinking as I read this. Like, it's so obvious that, like, if you have a cup of coffee and a cookie to start your day, it's probably not a good choice. Or as I like to say, if you have a cup of coffee and a muffin, which is really a piece of cake, but we call it a muffin, so you think you're not eating cake for breakfast, which I'm very grateful for because I love a muffin. But, you know, if you start with a sugary substance, sense, it's not necessarily, jumpstarting your day well.
But what's interesting is like the English, Laura and I were just talking about this the other night when it comes to talking about food and protein and everything, because everything's about protein now, right? But all of the British shows and novels and friends that you may have who are British, the traditional breakfast would be like tea and toast. Mm-hmm. Right? And
I think toast is a good start to the day. And also, historically, that toast was made with really good grain, someone was out there milling the grains that they were eating, so it was heartier toast.
So would it have protein then? More protein than today's bread?
It depends on who you're buying your flour from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I say that snidely because my son is, milling flour.
Yeah.
But no, it does. It depends on the quality of the bread you're buying. And that's why some things stay with you and some things don't. That whole thing of it stays with me. Or
right. Yeah. It sticks to your ribs kind of thing. And I realize that there are a whole, class differences too in what people eat for breakfast and whatnot. So.
Well, and we could go on and on about this. Diet culture is so faddish. Like the whole thing about protein right now. Yes, people need protein, but you go to the grocery store and you see Cheerios like now with added protein, and you have to just take a minute with yourself and say, really?
Yeah. Well, diet culture is so insidious, and
it
is ridiculous when you look back at certain diet fads, like only eat white food, and things like that.
Take the yolks out of your eggs. Yeah. It goes on and on. So I'm interested in this to have some of the basics that she's talking about. I'm not sure how I feel about some of the recipes because she talks a lot about the importance of pleasure, that pleasure is a lot of what eating is for people. So if your recipes aren't, don't speak to that, I have a little bit of an issue with it. But again, I haven't cooked the food yet, so don't quote me on that yet. Let me do some of the cooking first.
All right.
I will report back, I promise. Chris, what did you just read?
Well, do you want to get it over with?
Yes, please. Are we talking about The Jolly Corner by Henry James?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are indeed. So this is our latest story from the Penguin Book of Ghost Stories.
From Elizabeth Gaskell to Ambrose Bierce.
We've been reading this all year, as people who've been listening for a while know. If you're new to the podcast, we've been reading kind of basically a story every episode. Not exactly, but pretty close. And up this episode is The Jolly Corner by Henry James. It was first published in December 1908. It is one of his later stories and one of his most well-known and regarded ghost stories.
I started listening to it and I was like, what the what? What the what? Because I've been listening to this, on audio and then reading and then sometimes audio and reading. So I said to myself, you need to sit down with this book and read it. So I was reading it and it's in 3 parts, 3 very unbearable parts. Like not one of them is better than the other, or not one of them's even good, really.
I gotta say, it did grow on me. The first one was the worst for me. Like I almost just said, forget it. I'm not reading it. I'll just be the bad student when we record. But the second and the third were, I don't know if I got used to his style. Granted, I read this after reading The Turn of the Screw, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But that first part, I thought, oh, could you just write a clear sentence, please?
Yeah. It's really painful. And I was sitting on the couch next to the gentleman caller and I turned to him and said, Chris is reading one of his novels by choice right now. Like she's doubling down on Henry James. So I read it and then I couldn't get through the second part. So I said, okay, I'm going to listen to it. And I was making cookies and Jim walked through the door and he said, what are you listening to? And I told him and he's like, do you really have to do you and Chris pinky swear you have to read these? And I'm like, yes. And he said, it sounds like Henry James is reading it because it was kind of this old narrator. Anyway, shall we talk about what it's about?
Yeah. I think the premise of the story is really interesting. Yes. So it is about this man. He was born and raised in New York City, wealthy parents, wealthy family, but he has spent the last 30 years of his life in Europe. His eldest brother dies. Mom and dad have passed on too. His brother dies, and now all of the family real estate, he's inherited it. And New York is booming. He has some of his properties are these old, gorgeous homes are being converted into apartments. But the old family home has been sitting empty, and he doesn't want to do anything to it. All of the furniture has been removed. He has a cleaning lady that comes in once a day during the daylight hours and sweeps and airs out the place. And then he has been going to it and walking around through the rooms, having a bit of nostalgic time with the house. He has a friend, a woman named Alice. What was his name? I've blocked it.
Was it Bryson or something like that?
Something like, yeah.
I'll look it up. Even though I burned the pages, let me look through the chart. Bryden.
So it's Bryden, and he has this friend named Alice who is of his class. And she's always kind of had a thing for him. He's been gone. She's happy he's back. And he starts wondering, what would my life have been like? Who would I be if I had stayed in New York? You know, he's talking about all the commercialism and the fast pace and the new construction and the public transportation, and everything is not very likable to him. And so he starts wondering, what would he be like had he stayed? And Alice is like, I still would have liked you.
Even if you weren't a millionaire.
So then one night, he leaves his club. He's a member of several clubs in town. And, you know, he has his dinner there. And he's been living in a hotel. He leaves his club, but he never makes it back to his hotel. He was supposed to meet Alice. Was he supposed to meet her or something? And he doesn't show. And so she goes to the house and finds him. He's passed out. And then the cleaning lady comes in, and that's the end of the story. We won't totally say what happens at the end. But during this entire night that he is wandering around his old family estate home, which is, you know, a mansion, multiple stories, he is kind of confronting the ghost of himself that didn't exist, but that could have, like his alter ego, right?
Right. Exactly. It's all about his alter ego.
Right. Yeah. But the sentences are so convoluted. Like, this is late Henry James, as is The Turn of the Screw. I do remember reading some of his earlier stories, and I don't think that they were so convoluted or obscure. Is that the right word? Just ambiguous, maybe is the word. It was really frustrating.
It was really, really hard to read.
Yeah. I just thought, like, this is... I'm only finishing it because Emily said she read it.
Yeah, she checked in with me. Did you happen to read The Jolly Corner? She thought for sure I gave up. Yes, I read it. But I was amazed. I was like, Chris is reading something else of his at the same time. I mean, there was one part of about paragraph long sentence that I liked. Because the sentences were long. And it said, I mean, I don't even know why I liked it now that I'm reading it again. It said something about, like, basically he was saying he was going home. But he said, for safe restoration to shelter. And I was like, oh, that's kind of lovely.
Yes. I mean, there were some lovely moments and some nice sentences. One that I highlighted is as he's walking around, and the writing and the words that he uses are really wonderful at creating tension, because I was thinking he's going to kill himself. He's going to commit suicide just by some of the words choices that are made as he's walking up the stairs or looking up at a balcony or looking at the ladder that's in front of the house because workers have been working on it and he's standing at the window. And this sentence, I'll just read it. He found himself at moments, once he had placed his single light on some mantel shelf or in some recess, stepping back into the shelter or shade, effacing himself behind a door or in an embrasure, as he had sought of old the vantage of rock and tree. He found himself holding his breath and living in the joy of the instant, the supreme suspense created by big game alone. So, like, there's this hunting, like that he's hunting, like he's hunting himself. And you almost feel like in this case, and he talks about other types of hunting too, but that here he is going into the recess. Like, I could so picture it in a film, you know, that he kind of goes back into the shadow and is kind of waiting for something. And then I'm waiting for something to come, you know, that's bigger than a rat because it's big game, right? Oh, you know, really wonderful. And that might not be the best representation of a good sentence since I stumbled over it a bit.
Well, but that's kind of how the reading was. I think how you read it is exactly what my experience with it was. It was like I tried reading out loud. I tried reading and listening. It was just painful.
Yeah.
Aren't you glad we read it so y'all don't have to? Just kidding. There's probably some Henry James lover out there that's going to, get in our email inbox. We're just teasing.
I was wondering if there are Henry James listeners out there, because I'm kind of interested in reading a biography of him if it's under 600 pages. But there are a bunch out there. I'm just not sure which one, because it is really interesting. I mean, and I know his style changed, and that he, his earlier styles are more in like the realism phase of just representing a story. And later they got ambiguous and more almost modernists in that way of not being able to really pin down exactly what's going on or what's happened in that way, as earlier stories do, or is just like, a story with a beginning, middle, and end that's pretty clear about what happened. So in the biography, because a reminder that this is the collection that has a biography of each of the writers, I underlined one sentence that said, he was, in parentheses, in his own words, an unsaleable author, and yet also was one of the most significant novelists, critics, and short story writers of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. I love that he says he was an unsaleable author. I'm like, well, Henry, I kind of get it now. But I'm glad we read it. It wasn't ghosty enough for me at all, but I think it's important that we read him. Yeah, I mean, I could see why this story was chosen. I mean, maybe not just because of him, but because of the idea of it, that you're kind of confronting your past or going on this walk down memory lane and wondering. I think we all do that in our lives at some point, looking back and thinking like, God, what if I would have taken that job? Or what if I hadn't have moved there? What would my life be like?
Right. So it was the ghost of himself, right?
The ghost of himself that could have been.
Right.
Which is trippy.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, I just would have left him laying there on the cold marble floor, but that's me. Now, The Turn of the Screw is a novella of his, which I read as a buddy read with my friend Kate, who is a good friend of the podcast. We met Kate through Booktopia. Now, The Jolly Corner, that was published in 1908. The Turn of the Screw was 1898. And this is a story of a governess who comes to take care of two children, a boy who's 10 and a girl who's 8, I believe. They're wards of their uncle. Their parents have both died, and a lot of people die around them. The former governess is dead. The former man of the uncle, who doesn't want to be informed of anything about the children and lives elsewhere, his man died as well, and you find out why through the course of the story. And it's interesting because I read another story that I'll talk about as well that dealt with a governess. It was a position that women of a certain class could find themselves in to earn money or to find shelter, right? And the woman in this story, she is, I think she's 20. She's also the daughter of a religious man. And so implying that she kind of had a bit of a sheltered life when she turns up at this gorgeous estate with these two beautiful, perfect children. I mean, cue the horror music right there,
exactly.
Right? And it's one of those trippy stories, again, like with James. I think the sentences, there were some that I had to read multiple times. It wasn't as bad as that first part of The Jolly Corner, though, I have to say. Because I was thinking like, oh, this short story won't be a problem. I'm used to James's style. Oh, my gosh. I wanted to throw my e-reader across the room, but I didn't because, money. But what's neat is the edition I read is the Penguin Classics. I initially was just going to read a copy I got out of the library that was in the juvenile section and it had bigger font, but it was annoying me. So I ended up getting a Penguin Classics edition. And at the beginning, it has a chronology, like a chronology of his life, as they do usually at the beginning of a novel. And in 1900, are you ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
Henry James shaves off his beard. Do you want to know what else happened in 1900? Friendship with American novelist Edith Wharton develops. Correlation is not causation. Isn't that how the saying goes?
Yes.
But it made me wonder, like, And I'm joking, but I was just like, that is a really odd thing to write in there. Now, I know there's been a lot of talk lately about beards, again, in our culture and how they represent patriarchal authority and whatnot. And, Beards were very popular towards the late 19th century, but then men started shaving again. So I didn't read the introduction because I couldn't take any more Henry James. But when I do read the introduction one of these days, if it has anything about the beard and Edith Wharton, I'll share more.
I mean, it could have just been lice.
Yeah, I don't think Edith Wharton would approve of that.
No, I'm just saying, like, you know, they had itchy things back then. I always think of that. Like, ugh.
Right? That's why, like, rich people wore furs, so the bugs would go off of them onto the fur, theoretically. Yeah, so anyway, this was a reread for me. So I knew the basics of the story, that a governess takes charge of these two children and things happen. You are left wondering, did things happen? Are there really ghosts? Or is the governess imagining things? Like, is she the one having kind of a psychic break? Mm-hmm. So I tried to keep both things in mind while I was reading it, but then ultimately I didn't care. So, yeah.
Well, I was going to say the governess has a mental break, as one does when trying to watch children. But I just, but only partly. Well,
and the boy is at a school. You know, he's off at school, but when he comes home for Christmas break, there's a letter from the headmaster saying he has been expelled with no reasoning, like no explanation.
Well, that governess is going to find out.
Well, and the governess, there's also a housekeeper who has been there throughout. So she knew the former governess and the man who died, who's one of the ghosts haunting the place. So she knows what happened, but the governess never lets her, like, really speak. She's always cutting her off and everything. Now, I am not finished completely with Henry James this year. I do want to watch an adaptation of The Turn of the Screw, and I found one that is really pretty recent, and it stars Michelle Dockery from Downton Abbey.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, so I plan on watching that maybe by next episode, so I might have a follow-up to Henry James. Yeah, so again, Henry James, The Turn of the Screw, and The Jolly Corner. If any of you are Henry James fans, please let us know why.
Yes, please, because my Henry James era has finished. Well, I finished The Last Resort by Erin Entrada Kelly, and this has helped me get my first bingo on my Ghost Stories bingo card.
Yay!
Yes, this is in the vertical row that's on the third quarter read-along row. So I'm very excited.
Do you know what you read for that bingo strip?
I read our third quarter read-along, which was The Upstairs House, and then this one, The Last Resort, and then the center is the free one, and then The Mask of the Red Death short story by Edgar Allan Poe. And then for romance, this is funny because I put in parentheses, bit of a stretch. But I used Buckeye by Patrick Ryan, which was that real epic novel that just came out recently. But there is a romance in there, and there is a woman who can contact the spirit world.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm really excited. Although another book that I'm going to talk about that I just read could also be in the romance square. I have some doubling down. So The Last Resort, one of the things I really liked about it is that all of the characters are people of color. And Erin Estrada Kelly is a person of color, and she's written a lot of really interesting books. It's funny because a novel I read recently, I thought, why are they only describing the people who aren't white? It was really bothering me. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was really fun in this novel, which is a YA novel, I should say, that a character comes up and he's described as he was skinny, white, with blonde hair. And I thought, right on, Erin, good for you. You know, I mean, it's time for us to have books like that, and for kids, as we say, to have mirrors when they're reading. But this is definitely a haunted novel, and it's about Lila, who's middle school age. So she has a lot of that middle school angst going on, where there's a lot of dialogue in her head that has to do with her friends. And that's that age where your friends can be really great or really damaging. And she gets an opportunity to get distance from her friends because her grandfather passes away. And this is her paternal grandfather, and her father has been estranged from him. So they go back to Ohio, move into the grandfather's house, which is this big mansion, which is on the cover of the book. And along the way, when they were driving, they got in a little car accident, and Lila bumps her head. And after that, she can see dead people, or I should say ghosts, including her grandfather.
Interesting.
Yeah, so he communicates with her and he proceeds to tell her that he was actually murdered.
Wow.
So then it becomes a ghost story murder mystery. I really enjoyed it. The other thing that's really fun that I'm sure younger people are more hip to than I am, there's some fun illustrations in here and QR codes. And you can go to the QR codes and they've developed some games and things like that to kind of keep going with the story if you want to.
That's cool.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed it as an adult and I would recommend it if you're looking for a gift for a young person in your life or someone who's, looking for a fun haunted story that's not like bloody, scary in that way.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. So again, it's called The Last Resort by Erin Entrada Kelly, who has won Newbery Medals for some of her past writing.
Nice. Well, I did finish Chasing Beauty, The Life of Isabella Stewart Gardner. This is a biography by Natalie Dykstra. We've talked about this one several times. I've really enjoyed it. I listened to the audio primarily, but I'm happy to have a paper copy in my hand. I have the paperback. She was a friend of Henry James, and we saw a portrait of him in her museum when we went up to the museum in Boston. And that's all I'll say for now, because I know we're hoping to have an interview with Natalie Dykstra in the future. Another one I read is The Dogs of Venice by Stephen Rowley. This, I didn't realize when I talked about it last time as an upcoming read, was actually initially a Audible original. I think in 2020, it was during the pandemic. He was stuck at home, as so many of us are, and travel is one of his passions, Stephen's passions. And so he was experimenting with a version of this story, which has now become a book. In its novella length, it's a really nicely done hardcover. We talked about the cover last time, the cover artwork, I should say, showing a dog and a man on a bridge over a canal in Venice with the lovely Venetian facades in the background. The dog he's standing next to is kind of like a brown mutt type dog. And in the background, in one of the windows of one of the gorgeous buildings, is a white poodle. The white poodle never makes an appearance.
Oh.
Yeah. That was a cover tease, apparently. So this is the setup of the story. Paul, the main character, has just left a 5-year marriage that he did not see coming to an end. He and his husband were going to be going to Venice to celebrate for the holidays. He decides to go on his own, which, to his ex-husband's surprise. The ex-husband's going to be moving out of the apartment back in New York City while Paul is away. Paul's feeling sorry for himself. He doesn't like to be alone. Like, eating out alone for him is really challenging. And the first time he tries it, like, he has 2 bites and then he runs out, basically. He's very needy. And he sees this dog trotting along the canal, like just walking, doing his thing, like he's walking on a mission. And it's interesting because I think I've only seen a dog walking like that maybe once or twice in my life. Because when you see a dog, like a stray dog or a dog that's lost, they're usually walking around sniffing everything, right? Or, sometimes casually, sometimes in that panic mode, like, woohoo, I'm out of the backyard, I'm sniffing the, But to see a dog just like trotting down the street like that, like they're on a mission going somewhere, it is a powerful experience.
Mm-hmm. I've seen that.
Yeah. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this dog really sparks Paul's interest. And the dog becomes a mentor for him in a way, not in a like anthropomorphized way, but Paul is looking for the dog, sees the dog, has a revelation because of the dog. And so that ends up being a very heartwarming story. It is set before Christmas, so it could be a good Christmas story, holiday story / stocking stuffer. I should say there is a one-night stand. There's some alcohol. There's mention of drugs. So it's not like, like
don't buy it for your 5-year-old granddaughter because it's got a cute picture on the cover.
Well, exactly, right?
Yes.
We've talked about that when we did our year of reading romance last year, that some of the romance books look like they were innocent YA when there's like hardcore sex going on
like
the
very
inside.
Cartoony. Yeah.
So just so you know, though, that it does deal with adult themes. I really enjoyed it. He's the author of The Guncle and other books as well. And if you've read that, he has a really good kind of sarcastic sense of humor. Like, let me read you one bit here. He's talking about the dogs these dogs, the dogs of Venice, which I do have to say, I ended up wondering if the dogs of Venice are like spayed and neutered or if, it's a problem. So anyway, this is a couple lines from the book talking about the dogs of Venice. They were liberated and free. They stood in stark contrast to the New York City dogs who never stopped to be admired, keeping at all times a frenetic pace, as if the only safety were in the interior of a Park Avenue apartment, particularly Upper East Side dogs, overbred for status-obsessed owners and emotionally wrecked by having to exist on an island with millions of people, all equally high-strung. So, yeah, again, that's The Dogs of Venice by Stephen Rowley, out now. I haven't looked to see if the Audible original is still available. I know some of our listeners did listen to that and enjoyed it. Karen on Instagram at Barker for Books did confirm that she has a copy on order. So, and she is one who said she enjoyed the Audible original.
Oh, great. Good. Well, I finished a novel called Aftertaste by Daria Lavelle, and this came to me via our email inbox from a listener, Anne in Austin. I've been following your year of ghost stories. Love! ! And was hoping to join in one of the read-alongs. Now, the Texas Book Festival author list has dropped, so I'm reading many of those that grab my interest. One that I just finished seems like a pretty darn good fit for Emily because it focuses on ghosts, food, and fine dining. Trifecta, Anne. You are right. Nigella Lawson described it using the words magical and uncanny. I haven't heard you mention this one, so I thought I'd throw it out there. It's an easy weekend read. Aftertaste by Daria Lavelle. And then she goes on to say it's received rave reviews from The Guardian and The Times UK and me.
Nice.
Thanks, Anne. I did read it. I did love it. The only thing I disagree with is it was not a weekend read for me. It's pretty long. It's almost 400 pages. It took me quite a while to read it, actually, but I loved it. This is about a man named Konstantin Duhovny. He is an adult, but he lost his father when he was young. And it was one of those situations where he didn't get to say a proper goodbye, and it's always haunted him. And we meet him, and he is cooking in a kitchen and has an experience where he gets this weird tingling in his mouth and realizes eventually that what it is when he is in proximity to somebody who has lost somebody in their life, they have died, he can taste something that those people experience together that if he can recreate will bring the ghost of that person back so the people can finish unfinished business. It is such an amazing concept. I mean, as I was reading this book, I was like, this author, so creative. I mean, what a creative idea. It also has incredible descriptions of food, scenes in restaurants that are very realistic if you've ever worked on a line or something like that, which I have. I mean, she says in the acknowledgments that she ran some of the writing past, restaurant people, and you can really see it in the writing. So I really enjoyed it. I thought I would read this quote. It's separated into different parts and then very funly chapter headings. That's probably better than the word funly, which is
I like
word.
funly. When you're hangry, you don't have funly.
No, you do not. It is not funly to be angry. So this is under part 2, bitters and heat, and each of the parts have a quote. And so this is for you Proustians out there that read Swan's Way. But when the past is gone, after the people are dead, after their things are destroyed, smell and taste still linger on like souls ready to remind us. I thought that was really lovely. Mm-hmm. And it really does bring up that idea of, don't you have people in your life that aren't here anymore that you can taste something that you shared with them, or, you'll smell something and it takes you right back to a meal you had together or something like that. So it really harkens that. And the thing I also loved about it is that Kostya is Russian. He's living in a part of Brooklyn that is very Russian now, which is where my Russian grandfather lived. And I visited when I was his granddaughter and would come to visit from Ohio. And some of the places they mention are places that I went with him, which was a real memory hug. I do want to just mention that there is a content warning for grief and suicide, which is a theme in the novel as well. I listened to just a little bit of it just because I wanted to see what it was like. And it's one of those group narrations. It's really performed. So it's a great audiobook as well if people are interested. Again, it's called Aftertaste by Daria Lavelle. Anne, thank you so much. This was nowhere on my radar. So I really appreciate you thinking of us.
Such a great concept. Like you said, in my family case, there'd be a lot of tasting of Portillo's beef sandwiches. Chicago
That's
delicacy,
great.
yes. I did finish my first Victober book. I guess The Turn of the Screw would count as Victorian, but intentionally for Victober, I picked up Anne Bronte's 1847 novel, Agnes Grey, and I really enjoyed it. This is another story about a governess. She's also the daughter of a religious man. The family has fallen on hard times, and she wants to help the family get some cash flow and decides to become a governess. Her mom helps place her with a family. She ends up serving with two different families. One is like a nouveau riche family. She's approaching in the carriage and going into the park of where the mansion is. Like the trees are new, and the mansion is new, and the family's awful. Like they have no regard for like their children. They're pretty much just wild. And the son, talk about content warning. There's a lot of animal abuse in this book. And I thought that Willa Cather's A Lost Lady had an awful character or did something to a bird. The boy of this family, he tortures little birds. Like, it's awful. But Agnes Grey is a woman. She's young. I mean, I think she might be 18 to 20. Has such really strong principles about other beings, other sentient beings, that she does something that I think is like a hardcore, compassionate person. And I really liked her from that instance. And I won't talk about it or go into detail about any of that. Now, the second family she serves with is not that much better. They're just rude. They're older money. There's so much entitlement and a lot to do with the eldest daughter, who is beautiful, but she has no soul, basically. She's not grounded. She has no sense of really self-respect. She has this misguided sense that her sexual attraction is power, and she doesn't know that that's very fleeting. And I guess I shouldn't go into too many details. I don't want to give spoilers too much. I know this book has been around for a long time, but I really liked Agnes Grey. This story is based a lot on Anne Bronte's own experience of being a governess and dealing with families who don't really raise their children with morals and ethics and standards and boundaries of any kind.
Well, I mean, a lot of people who got governesses just wanted to have children so they could say they had children. They didn't even really want to help raise them.
Well, right. And just to have family attachments and marry them and things like that. And also there's no birth control or not much. Mm-hmm. And so you had children whether you wanted to or not, if you were a heterosexual married couple, right? One of the things I did appreciate about this book is that there's a line from Agnes where she basically says that there are good people and bad people in all classes, which I really appreciated for this time period. And she shows that. And I would say that gender-wise as well, because in the second family, there's one of the daughters who is cruel to animals as well. Mm. And I thought that was really different because you don't really see a lot of girls being cruel to animals in literature that I've been aware of anyway. Now, we on the Book Cougars have talked about how we're not exactly middle-aged anymore. We're at the tail of being middle-aged, so we've wondered about our subtitle, if we should update that. And we've had some ideas in the past, and some listeners have given us a few ideas and some feedback about ones that we've proposed. But Anne Bronte, I have to read this because when I read this, I have to share this with you all because when I read it, I thought, oh my God, this could be our new tagline.
Because, our current tagline is 2 middle-aged women on the hunt for a good read.
Yes. So there's a line when she's talking about seeing somebody, and I'll just read this one line. She says, At least you would live to see the girls married, and yourself a happy grandfather with a canty old dame for your companion. Canty old dame. I love that. And a canty means lively, active. And I thought that describes us pretty well.
Yeah.
I think.
I'm game to be a canty old dame.
I like that. Canty old dame.
Yeah.
And, literary lineage. We're getting this from Anne Bronte, one of the greats.
Yeah. So, hello, we're the Book Cougars, two canty old dames on the hunt for a good read. How does it sound, everyone? We'll be taking votes.
Yes, let us know what you think. But yeah, so Anne Bronte, and this is a short one, under about 190 pages, compared to The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, which I read last year, which is a much bigger book. And I really love The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. Like that one I look forward to rereading. It was also based on her experience of family strife. But yeah, Anne Bronte, Agnes Grey. I also said in the last episode, or maybe I said it on a video, I don't remember, that I thought that this was the last Bronte I had to read. I was wrong. I was wrong by 3 books, which, come on, they did not publish a whole lot because they all died so awfully young. I have to read The Professor, Shirley, and Villette, all by Charlotte Bronte, the elder sister of Anne, who also wrote Jane Eyre. And then Emily Bronte wrote Wuthering Heights, which is one that I read. And I remember reading it thinking, like, people call this a love story? Like, what is wrong with people? I think it's like young love and also dysfunctional, but I've wondered about rereading Wuthering Heights.
So how did you discover that you needed to read these? Was it because in the back of this book, you saw all these books that you didn't read?
I think I probably just looked at a list of all the Bronte novels and I was like, oh my gosh, like, okay, I have a lot more to go. So I have acquired those 3 novels.
Oh, right on.
And we'll see.
So we did a buddy read of The Birds by Daphne Du Maurier. We're about to talk about it. We just want to insert that there are spoilers. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. If you don't want to hear, please stop listening. Fast forward. We don't want to ruin it for anyone who hasn't read it yet.
But then go read it and then listen.
It's short and very powerful.
Well, we also had another buddy read, a short story by Daphne Du Maurier. She has a new collection out called After Midnight, 13 Tales for the Dark Hours. And this has an introduction by Stephen King. And we found out about this collection from another listener. Thank you, Lisa. She became a patron, which we really appreciate, Lisa.
Yes,
thank you so much. And when she first joined our Patreon community, we shared a little back and forth email about her love of Daphne Du Maurier, because it was at the time when I was reading Rebecca this summer. And she sent us this information about this article that was in The Guardian written by Stephen King, where he's talking about this collection because it just pubbed very recently. And he wrote, as I said, the introduction. So in the show notes, we will put a link to this article, a gift link. But he also did say something about short stories that I think is really interesting, that I think I read on a recent video, but I want to read it again. I love Du Maurier's stories. I love their clarity. I love their often grim view of human nature. I love her prodigious talent and narrative ability. There is a reason why collections of short stories are, as a rule, less popular than novels. With a novel, you settle in with a cast of characters for what may be a day or two, if you're a fast reader like my wife, or a week or more, if you're a slow reader like me. When it comes to short stories, the reader has to create a fictional world in his or her imagination, then disassemble it, move on to the next fictional world and build that one. That can be hard work. It's not with these stories. I think that's such a great paragraph and really true about short stories. It's why some people have disdain for them, because they feel like, I just started getting into the characters and the story's over, or it was ambiguous, or whatever it might be. But when I talked to Chris about this book and, just got a copy of it in the office, she said, let's read The Birds together. It's a reread for her. It's a first read for me. I've always wanted to read it. So we did. What did you think?
Oh, I love that story. I think it's one of my favorite short stories. Mm-hmm. If I had to make a list of favorites, I think The Birds would be on there. It's so compelling.
It's really compelling. And as I was reading it, I was thinking, what kind of mind she must have had? Because it's so unusual also.
It is. And it's so just in a nutshell, it's about a man who lives on the British coast, on the seacoast, right? Mm-hmm. And he's a farmer. He's also a war veteran from World War II. He has some type of disability, but he does work on a farm as well. And he noticed the birds are being really active and that there are a lot more of them. And, he notices this. And then that night, the birds start trying to get into the house through the window. He's married. He has a wife. They have 2 small children. And they live in an isolated area. The nearest neighbor is the farmer who he works for. And then there are some other homes that he could see their chimney smoke, but he's pretty isolated and he likes to be alone. He likes to work alone. But the birds keep accumulating. And if you've seen the movie, the Alfred Hitchcock movie, which is, I think, one of probably the best known movies of his, maybe anyway, you know that the birds just go ballistic and start attacking humans.
They take over.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it has this feeling of being confined, this story, that she does so well, where the birds really are just taking over and their world feels smaller and smaller as it's happening.
Yeah, because they're in this small house of theirs and he has to board everything up and try and save his family, because the birds are attacking. Even that first night, like they peck at his hands and his hands are bleeding. He can see the escalation happening very early on, whereas like the farmer and another person, they just kind of laugh it off like, oh, we're going to go shooting the birds. Ha ha. And he just has this sense. And I don't know if it's because he's a veteran and he's been in war when a lot of these other people haven't, that he can feel what's about to explode. Mm-hmm. So he starts taking precautions. And he meets his daughter where the school bus is going to drop her off because they've started doing broadcasts from London, the BBC, about what's going on with the birds a little bit.
And he's taking it seriously, even though some are not taking it seriously.
Right. Yeah. Because, and I just thought that was so well done. Because in a time like when you can feel a crisis starting, or you think something that's starting, if it escalates, it could be catastrophic. And you can imagine that, and other people around you can't, and they're kind of laughing it off. You just think like,
yeah. I mean, there are people, or there's like that magical thinking, we see it around here with hurricanes, people are like, it's going to be nothing, and stay home and, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And what's a lot of things are interesting, like thinking about the time period, right? That this is written in the post-war period when, like we're saying, the protagonists had fought in the war. And the readership of this story would have recently experienced going through the war. But that's also the beginning of the Cold War. And so there are all these speculations of like, what's going on? Did the Russians poison the birds?
Right.
Because this wind that's coming from the east, like it starts on December 3rd or 4th?
December 3rd.
Yeah, like December 3rd, all of a sudden it's winter. It's gotten incredibly cold.
Let me just read the first sentence. Okay. On December the 3rd, the wind changed overnight and it was winter. Yeah. I mean, that's such a great first sentence.
Yeah, totally. It's ominous from that first sentence. And so the birds keep coming and there's more of them and more of them. And he thinks at one point that he sees the waves, the white waves breaking, but it's actually a bunch of seagulls.
Yeah.
And then later he thinks he sees a naval vessel coming and it's more seagulls. And it's not just seagulls, it's all these other birds too that usually don't flock together that he notices. So like, here's this man, he's aware of warfare, he's observant of nature, he knows what birds hang together and which don't. So you feel like you would be in really good hands with him if there were a crisis.
Right. But that also something imminent is coming. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I thought that was interesting, the Russian aspect of it. And I knew my friend was going to tell me why. And she names all the birds, which I think is really interesting, like the different types of birds. Mm-hmm. It just was such a good story. I loved it so much. And the couple things I wrote down is I think there should be a December 3rd reread party every year. Which would be fun.
Yeah.
I also wrote, I really want a pasty which is not the pasty you put on your boobs, everybody, but it's something that they eat there, which is, basically pie dough stuffed with vegetables and potatoes. They're delicious. I love them so much. His wife packs him one for dinner. Some people call them pasties. Some people call them pasties. When my daughter Rachel was living in northern Michigan, there were people who immigrated from England. So there's a lot of pasty places up there, and we always would stop and get them and fill up the freezer. Anywho, I digress, but that was one thing that I wrote a lot. I had to write down several words that I didn't know. And then there was a sentence that I loved where the father said that it was going to be a black winter, not a white one, which I thought was so ominous. And the little girl says that. She's going off to school or coming home from school. I can't remember which. And she had said to her friends, my dad says it's going to be a black winter, not a white one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. A lot of feelings of darkness.
Yes. And just so much impending doom because as the story goes on, the BBC broadcasts get a bit more urgent. And then at some point, there's just music playing, which is what happened during the war or happens during elections and stuff they say. And then the broadcast just stop because there's some tension between the countryside and the towns. Because at first he thinks, well, I'm glad we're not at the towns because all the birds, he sees all of these types of birds just flying further inland. Just the sky is dark with birds. There's so many of them. And then later he wonders like if they would be better off in the city or in a town.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I really feel for these people.
For sure.
I want them to make it.
Yeah.
Do you think they do?
I do. Yeah. I think they took the precautions, because of his past experience and that other people didn't take the precautions and had different consequences.
Yes, they did. And he figures out early on that the tides play a role. So there is a reprieve. And that made me think a little bit of this I Am Legend, a story by Richard Matheson, which is about vampires and like the last surviving human being holed up in his home and the vampires trying to get in. And that story was from 1954. When was this one published? Do you remember? Oh my gosh. So The Birds was published in 52 and, you have to wonder if there was any inspiration there or if it was just that sense of, it's post-war and we're kind of on our own now as the Cold War is ramping up and we're just in our homes trying to protect ourselves from something we don't even know what it is,
Yeah. I want to say something now that we have somewhat spoiled this story. This was also in the Guardian article by Stephen King. He says, I am impatient with the idea of spoilers, a term that's come into vogue along with other unpleasant side effects of the internet in general and social media in particular. I find You Spoiled It to be typically the cry of spoilt people. I'd argue you can rarely spoil a good story because the joy is in the journey rather than the arrival. Du Maurier's stories are a notable exception to that rule.
Interesting.
To talk about any of them at length would destroy their effect. Suffice it to say that you are in the hands of a master storyteller, a diabolical one at that. Which makes me think of when I read Rebecca and I was like, I read Rebecca. It was good.
Right.
Because it's so hard to talk about her style and her twists and turns. So apologies, we did kind of spoil that one. Thank you to Lisa for telling us about this new collection. It's a beautiful cover. It has, like we said, an intro by Stephen King. And I plan to read all of these short stories. I'm really excited about it. And I think, Chris, didn't we agree that we're going to try to watch Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds?
Yes,
right?
Let's try and watch it before next episode. Do you think you could do that? I think I can
Definitely.
too. It's been a long time since I've seen it. And Laura and I actually went through Bodega Bay where he filmed it on a road trip. It doesn't look anything like, Bodega Bay, the real place in California, it's like north of San Francisco. Alfred Hitchcock, and I remember looking this up afterwards because the town does claim the movie as like, hey, this was filmed there. We ate at a place called the Birds Cafe, But Alfred Hitchcock did a lot of interesting things with filming and transposing things to make the town look different.
Like Cornwall.
Probably
Like the
just
British coast.
like an isolated.
Oh,
well,
okay.
you know, the movie does start in San Francisco, so you know that you're in California. But he wanted to make it look like an isolated village on the water, you know, kind of thing. But
well, so if y'all want to read the short story and watch the movie, we will be talking about the movie next episode.
yes, and this has nothing to do with ghosts. This is just something that we happened to buddy read because, wow. I mean, I was really surprised when I read that story. Like, I really liked the movie from what I remember, but the short story I thought was so powerful.
I don't think I've seen the movie. I think it's one of those where you've seen scenes of it, like the classic scenes. So I think I have, but I'm pretty sure I haven't.
Well, I was a kid, and I remember watching it with my sister and her boyfriend. And I'm sure they wanted me to leave, but I didn't get the hint because I wanted to watch the movie. But that's when I found out my sister is like, she gets freaked out about birds, like even before watching that movie. Oh. So there is a real fear for some humans with birds. And I remember reading an article about some archaeological dig where they found a bunch of human skulls and skeletons in this kind of pit area that all had like a hole in the back of the head. And the theory was that like pterodactyls had picked up, I don't know, humans didn't exist when pterodactyls existed, did they? But the theory was that some big bird actually picked up humans with the talon, and that thumb talon went right through their brain, and they carried them off and ate them and dropped them.
And one wonders why her sister was afraid of birds. Was this a real article, or was this a story that Chris told her sister? We'll never know.
Oh, little sisters.
Chris, did you go on any Biblio adventures?
You know what? I really didn't. I was in New York again, doing some archival research. And on the way home, I saw a lot of people who'd been to Comic-Con.
Oh, fun.
Who had lots of product and were very excited to get home and look through everything. So, and one of these years, I'd love to go to Comic-Con.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. But no, how about you?
I had a rewatch of something, which is very unusual for me. I have to admit, I was feeling the feels of what's happening in the greater world right now, and I just wanted some comfort. So I rewatched the Becoming documentary, which came out in 2020, and it follows Michelle Obama when she's on book tour for her memoir, Becoming, which was the first book she wrote after they left the White House. She now has another one out. And it was really good. I mean, both of us have read the book and really enjoyed it. And it was interesting to hear her revisit their years in the White House. Her tour included a lot of very famous people who are great interviews. And then it also showed scenes of her talking to young people, which is really a gift of hers. And she also goes with her mother back to the house she grew up in on the south side of Chicago. It just was something I needed on a particular night.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's on Netflix. I know not everyone has Netflix, but if you want a little walk down memory lane, Becoming, the documentary with Michelle Obama. And then Chris is forgetting that we went on a joint jaunt together just today.
Well, I didn't forget. I knew we'd talk about it. Yeah, we went to see a fantastic new first ever production of Zora Neale Hurston's play Spunk at Yale Rep right here in New Haven.
I've lived here for 10 years, have never been to Yale Rep. I did an internship back in 1988 as a college student in a restaurant called Scoozy's, which no longer exists. There's a different restaurant in the building, which is literally next door to Yale Rep. And never got to go. So it was so fun just to be in this building that you walk by every time you visit Yale's campus, you know? Yes, very exciting.
We should have taken a picture of you next to the building. I didn't think about that, where the restaurant had been.
Yeah, or we should go eat there. That would be fun because there is a new restaurant there.
Okay.
Yes, and I digress for a second. So at intermission, I went to the bathroom and there was a poster with Jason Robards from the play he did in 1988, A Long Day's Journey into Night, which is a Eugene O'Neill play. And one of my vivid memories of working in that restaurant was Jason Robards knocking on the door before opening because he was desperate for a cup of coffee or a sandwich or something. And I remember thinking, Jason Robards is knocking on the door. So, I mean, it was so ironic to walk into the bathroom and there was 2 posters there and one of them was that. Anywho, Zora Neale Hurston wrote the short story Spunk in 1925. And she wanted to write plays and moved to New York from Florida, where she was living, to really take on Broadway. And sadly didn't have a lot of success. One of her plays was produced. Spunk was never produced. She did write the play in 1935.
Right. She wrote it, and it was apparently copyrighted and at the Library of Congress. You know, sometimes these archives, scholars sometimes know what's there, but they're there for different reasons. And so it takes somebody who's maybe doing something different with the research that they're doing to find something that gets published. Because I know, like, there's an Edith Wharton story that was, you know, quote, bound in an archive that scholars knew about forever, but somebody came along and published it. So this is the case with this play. The right person came along, saw it at the Library of Congress, and fell in love with it, became fascinated with it. And now here they are 20 years later, seeing a production of it.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, 20 years later?
Isn't it for the woman who found it?
Oh, that's how long it took her to get it.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. When she was a student, I believe, at Yale, she found out about it, but it's taken that long because it's a musical. And Zora Neale Hurston had done some research, and they have record of her singing songs and the type of music that she was interested in having be part of this play. But someone had to produce all the music as well.
Right, yeah. So this is a little bit from the program that we have from Spunk. And I'll just read this. Considered a pioneer in ethnomusicology, Zora Neale Hurston documented the music and oral traditions of Black communities in Florida through fieldwork, recordings of work songs, spirituals, and other folk music. The surviving text of Spunk, which she registered for copyright with the Library of Congress in 1935, includes song titles and some lyrics, but no written scores. Over the last 4 years, our creative team has been using this script, along with their own research, as a roadmap to develop the musical score that we believe is closest to what Hurston intended. The play includes many songs from the early 20th century, most of which are now in the public domain, as well as new songs and arrangements by composer and music supervisor Nemaya Luckett. And, you know, that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm. It was really good.
It gave me shivers, you know?
Yeah, it was really good, and it was really special to know the history. And there is an article in the New York Times that I read before we went, and I think it's really interesting, whether you have any intention of seeing the play or not. If you're interested in learning more about Zora Neale Hurston, it's a quick article, really interesting. They have links you can click that you hear her voice singing and talking. So we'll put a gift link in the show notes for that if you're interested in seeing it. The run of the show, I believe, goes to October 25th. Again, it's at Yale Rep Theater. I think there are still some tickets available.
Yeah, we went to a matinee today, and what's really neat is at the beginning of the show, you know how sometimes there's music playing before the curtain goes up. They actually had a reel playing with actual footage from the 20s or 30s with Zora Neale Hurston singing.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
It was really cool.
Yeah. Really well done. The set was really interesting. There was one scene where there's this hoodoo, what would you call it?
Ceremony?
A ceremony, yeah, to invoke something onto somebody. And it was really well done. I said to Emily, like, you know, afterwards, like sometimes those types of scenes just seem a little hokey, or they're almost made humorous in some way. And this was so dark and scary and just well done. Like they used shadows and the actors and masks and then a screen in front where they could project stuff. I just thought it was one of the best scenes I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, I turned to Chris and I said, it's a haunting. Yes. It's so fitting for our year. We won't spoil what the story's about. We will also put a link in the show notes where you can actually read the short story, which I did read a while back when we were at Barnard. They had a Zora Neale Hurston display, and I picked it up and read it. It's very short,
Yeah, it was like 2 pages,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
very, very short.
And I wonder if they'll release a soundtrack. That would be really cool if they did, because the music was really compelling and sometimes hard to understand the lyrics. So it would be kind of neat to see that on like Apple Music and to get the lyrics as well.
And all of the musical instruments were performed by the cast as they were singing and dancing, which I thought was amazing. There was no orchestra or pit or soundtrack playing over them.
Yeah, that was really fantastic.
Yeah,
they
really
had
good.
Piano, trombone, guitar, banjo,
Saxophone.
washboard. Yeah, I mean, a lot of different.
Yeah.
Good story.
Yeah, Spunk, Zora Neale Hurston. So, upcoming jaunts.
Well, one thing I wanted to mention, Tina, who's a listener who is working on her PhD that involves the Brontes, who talked with me through email about which edition of The Tenant of Wildfell Hall to read. We exchanged some emails recently since I was reading Agnes Grey, and she told me about a really exciting read-along of Shirley by Charlotte Bronte that the Bronte Parsonage is doing. And it's the first time that they've done this type of event. It's a 4-part read-along of Bronte's novel, Shirley, and it's with 3 scholars of Bronte. So I haven't listened yet. I mentioned that I have a copy of Shirley now. I'm torn about which Bronte novel to read next, because the Professor was Charlotte Bronte's first novel. It's short. I don't know if I should read that or if I should just jump into Shirley. So I'll probably flip a coin at some point. But we will put a link to that read-along. It is on YouTube, where you can watch and listen to them talk about the different chapter breakdowns. And Tina said that it does sound like it's going to be a pretty meaty conversation.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Tina.
Well, speaking of listeners, Mary emailed to let us know that there's a Smithsonian event, Margaret Fuller, An Extraordinary Transcendental Woman, on Tuesday, November 25th from 6:45 to 8:15 Eastern Time. She said she's done a lot of these Smithsonian events and classes, and they're wonderful. So we'll put a link to the show notes. There is a cost for it. It's $25 if you're a member, $35 if you're not. So this is the year. It seems Margaret Fuller continues to be having her moment. We want to remind people that on October 26th, at 7 p.m. Eastern, that's our next Patreon reading salon. We're going to be talking about translated books. If you're a patron of the Book Cougars podcast at the $5 level or higher, you are invited to attend. We would love to have you. If you've been thinking of becoming part of our Patreon community, all of that information is in the show notes or at bookcougars.com.
And we should say, too, the whole Patreon thing is to support us financially. It's not like we have a lot going on there that we don't talk about here, because we didn't want to have that kind of split. But the salon is definitely a perk of being a member at the $5 level or above. So thank you so much to everyone who supports us financially and who helps spread word about us through word of mouth. That's so important as well.
Absolutely. And you also, when you go over to Patreon, you can see we have a little bit of swag you get when you first join.
That's true. We do have swag. Yeah. Yes.
It's a one-time thing.
I just say that because I know a lot of creatives on Patreon have a lot of extra episodes and all of these different perks and things like that. And we don't. As Emily said, we have some swag that you get when you first sign up. But this monthly salon is something we've been doing for 2 years now for people at the $5 level and above. And we love it. And so do listeners who join.
And it's every 4th Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern. So I'm also heading to Colorado. So I'm hoping to have some Biblio adventures there, if nothing else, to visit my favorite bookstore there, White River Books. But we'll see what other bookish business I can get up to.
Nice. So what are your upcoming reads? Are you kind of already thinking about what you're going to be packing to take to Colorado?
Well, funny you should ask that, Chris. Yes, I am planning to read this slim paperback. It's called All the Beauty in the World, The Metropolitan Museum of Art and Me by Patrick Bringley. The Gentleman Caller's sister, I spent a week with her on the Cape, and she read this on the plane here. And Patrick worked at the New Yorker, and I'm not sure what happened in his life, but he left that position and ended up working as a guard at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And the book is about that experience and him studying different pieces of art and meeting people at the museum. I'm really looking forward to reading this.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, she said it was really lovely. And then I have How to Sell a Haunted House, our Q4 read-along by Grady Hendrix. My plan is to start that on Halloween, October 31st. If anyone is interested in joining me. I'm not doing any big shindig or anything. That's my plan.
Okay.
But we'll be discussing it on November 7th with a group on Zoom. There's still some spots available if you're interested, and that is at 7 p.m. Eastern.
And that is free and open to anyone who registers. I have in my sweaty little palms here a brand new copy of Elizabeth Gaskell's Gothic Tales. Yeah, so we read her story, The Old Nurse's Story, which leads the Penguin Book of Ghost Stories that we've been reading this year. And I really like that story, so I wanted to read more from her. And I also came across reference to her book, Lois the Witch, which is, so Gaskell was a British writer, and that one is set in America during the witch trials in Salem, I believe. Some other thing I was reading mentioned it, and I thought, oh, okay, Gaskell's coming up again. I think I'm going to pursue her a little bit more. So I'll be reading that. And then we also got here at Book Cougars headquarters a book I'm excited about by Rachel Harrison, Play Nice. Home is where the horror is. So this is a haunted house type story. The main protagonist, she has a picture-perfect life as a stylist and influencer. And the family home is possessed by a demon, possibly.
Kind
Maybe
of
not.
messes up your perfect life.
Yes, we'll find out more about this. The cover, if you look at it, has a purple Victorian type home that looks a bit dilapidated with spider webs and missing walls and a big demon tail kind of wrapping around it with blood on the tip. So, yes, so that's coming up. And then we do have another joint read. Our next story in our Penguin Book of Ghost Stories is The Readjustment by Mary Austin. We'll be discussing that on the next episode, number 246. I think that's all we have to say.
We do.
I mean, we could say a lot more, but I think we're both getting a little glassy-eyed and hungry.
Or hangry.
Hangry. I don't know if I have enough energy to be hangry yet, honestly.
We wish you all
lots of happy reading.
In the Out Now category, these are books that we've spoken about on previous episodes, but they were not published yet. We have Death at the Door by Olivia Blake. This is a Ruby and Cordelia mystery. I read A New Lease on Death, which was the first in the series and really enjoyed it. Death at the Door is the second book in the series, and I have it in my sweaty little palms and plan to read it soon.
Thanks for listening to The Book Cougars with Chris Wallach and Emily Fine. We'll be back again with another episode in 2 weeks. Until then, come chat with us on social media, Goodreads, or email us at bookcougars@gmail.com. If you'd like to help support our podcast, please tell others about us, leave a review wherever you listen, and consider becoming a patron. Even $1 a month is a big help. Learn more about that on our website, bookcougars.com, where you'll find the show notes for this and all of our past episodes.
Thanks, everybody.
This episode was edited by Pat Keogh Sound Design.